The great trade city of Zerath Prime glittered under the light of two suns. Towers of glass and crystal touched the clouds, and the wide streets were filled with every kind of alien being. Merchants shouted about rare goods. Hover carts carried glowing crates. Airships drifted above like giant silver fish. It was a place of business, politics, and power, but for Leora, it was also a cage. She walked through the main market street with her head slightly lowered, her long silver hair falling over her face. She wore a flowing Ireni robe, its pale blue fabric moving with each step. The robe's style showed her noble heritage, but the way people reacted to her erased any sign of dignity. An elderly Ireni male she passed stiffened and quickly moved away. A young merchant's smile faded as she drew closer. Even a group of armored city guards shifted uncomfortably when she walked by. Leora felt it all. She always felt it. The rejection, the discomfort, the way others' emotions twisted when she was near. It wasn't her appearance. She was considered beautiful by Ireni standards. It was something deeper, something inside her. From birth, Leora had carried a rare genetic trait. The Ireni called it the empath's curse. It caused her to project an uncontrolled emotional aura. For most males of her species, being near her stirred unease, anxiety, and even fear. No one could stay close for long. In Ireni society, where arranged partnerships and perfect genetic matches were everything, she was seen as flawed, an imperfection, an outcast in fine clothing. That morning, the streets were even busier than usual. A trade summit was happening, a meeting of leaders and merchants from many worlds. The Ireni Council had invited dozens of alien delegates to discuss peace and new trade routes. Security was tight, with armored guards from multiple species patrolling the plaza. Leora had not planned to attend. Crowds made her condition worse. But her aunt, a high-ranking council aide, insisted she help deliver a set of rare documents to the summit hall. "Do this quietly," her aunt had said, "and avoid drawing attention. The less people notice you, the better." Leora was used to such instructions. She crossed the outer plaza and approached the tall gates of the summit hall. The gates themselves were works of art, two massive doors of black metal inlaid with gold patterns that told the history of Zerath Prime. Inside, the air smelled of polished stone and rare spices. Delegates spoke in hushed tones, their translators humming softly. Leora kept her eyes down and moved through the crowd, careful not to meet anyone's gaze. She was almost at the council table when it happened. A group of foreign guards walked through the main corridor. Their uniforms were strange, dark body armor with silver stripes, helmets clipped at their belts. They moved with a casual confidence, scanning the crowd. Leora had never seen their species before. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped aside to let a merchant pass and collided directly with her. The impact made her stumble. The document case slipped from her hands. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she began, instinctively pulling back. She expected the usual reaction, a look of discomfort, a quick retreat. But instead the man bent down, picked up the case, and held it out to her with an easy smile. "No harm done," he said. His voice was warm, his accent strange but clear. His eyes, a deep brown, studied her without a trace of fear. Leora froze. She felt the connection immediately. Her aura reached out, brushing against him, expecting the usual recoil. But there was nothing, no discomfort, no wave of unease. His emotions felt steady, calm, curious. You're not—" she started, then stopped herself. The man tilted his head slightly. "Not what?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing. Thank you for picking this up. Any time." He glanced at the council chamber ahead. "You work here?" "Not exactly," Leora replied, adjusting her robe. "I'm only delivering something." The man gave a small nod. "I'm Daniel Reyes. "Commander, United Earth Fleet." He gestured toward the other guards. "We're here with the human delegation." Human. She had heard the word before. A relatively new species on the interstellar stage, known for being adaptable and unpredictable. "I'm Leora," she said softly. "Well, Leora," Daniel said with a small grin, "maybe I'll see you around." Then he walked on, his boots clicking against the polished floor. Leora stood still for several seconds, her heart racing. For years, every male who came near her had shown some kind of discomfort. Yet that human had stood close, spoken normally, even smiled at her, as if her curse didn't exist. That evening, Leora sat in her small garden balcony overlooking the city. She couldn't stop replaying the encounter in her mind. The calm steadiness she had felt from him was unlike anything she'd experienced. She didn't know why it mattered so much. They had only exchanged a few words. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt normal. Below, the streets were still busy. The twin suns were sinking, casting golden light over the city's crystal spires. From the summit hall in the distance, music and voices drifted on the wind. The event would go on late into the night. She wondered if the human commander was still there. The next day, her aunt sent her again to the summit hall with more sealed messages. "Walk quickly. Do not linger," her aunt reminded her. As she approached the gates, she saw the human guards again. This time, Daniel spotted her first. He raised a hand in greeting. "You again?" he said with an amused tone. "Careful, people might think you're following me," Leora almost laughed, an unusual reaction for her. "I'm here on an errand." "Then I won't keep you," he said, stepping aside. But then he added, "Although, if you have time later, I'd like to hear more about this city. We humans don't get tours often." She hesitated. I'm not a good guide." "Why not?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she explain without sounding strange? "Because being near me makes most people uncomfortable," was not the kind of thing one said casually. "Never mind," she said instead. "This city, it has its beauty." "I'll take your word for it," Daniel said. His eyes lingered on her for a moment, studying her in a way that felt not judgmental, but genuinely curious. Leora felt something shift inside her. For once, she wasn't wishing for the moment to end. Later that afternoon, the grand banquet began. Delegates from every species gathered in the crystal hall. The ceiling shimmered with embedded starlight stones, and floating trays carried exotic foods. Musicians played instruments that glowed and sang. Leora was there only to deliver a final message, then leave quietly. She slipped between tables, keeping her head down, until she overheard something that made her stop. Two Ireni nobles, both from powerful houses, were speaking in hushed voices near a corner. "The Vicari will respond violently." One said, "Exactly. And the council will have no choice but to declare war," the other replied. "By then, our fleets will already be in position." Leora's breath caught. War? Between the Ireni and the Vicari? The summit was meant to prevent that, not cause it. She stepped back quietly, but her heel caught on the edge of a carpet. She stumbled, right into someone behind her. It was Daniel. "Easy there," he said, steadying her. His tone was light, but his eyes flicked toward the nobles, catching their suspicious glance. Before Leora could speak, a servant approached carrying a tray of jeweled glasses filled with a shimmering green drink. One glass was set on Daniel's table. Leora's empathic sense brushed against the servant's emotions and felt a sharp spike of guilt, fear, and intent. Without thinking, she grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him back. The glass tipped over, spilling its contents onto the floor. A moment later, a faint hiss rose from where the liquid touched the tile. It was corrosive. Daniel stared at the stain, then at her. "That was poison," she whispered. Thai dus. Music in the hall continued, but around them, the air seemed to grow tense. Daniel straightened, scanning the room. We need to move. Now. Leora followed as he guided her toward a side exit. But before they reached the door, a deep rumble shook the building. The crystal chandeliers swayed. Screams erupted. Outside, through the high windows, she saw smoke rising from the plaza. The summit had just turned into something far worse. The explosion outside rattled the glass windows of the banquet hall. Leora's heart pounded as the deep rumble faded into shouts and screams. Delegates scattered, guards drew weapons, and the music stopped instantly. Daniel's hand tightened on her arm. "Stay with me," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Leora's instinct was to move away. Her curse always made people pull back sooner or later. But Daniel's grip didn't falter, and he didn't look uneasy. He simply began moving her through the chaos, clearing a path without shoving or shouting. "What's happening?" Leora asked, raising her voice over the noise. "Don't know, yet," Daniel replied, his eyes scanning the hall. "But that wasn't an accident." They reached a side corridor just as another group of human guards rushed past. Their boots clanged against the polished floor, rifles held ready. Daniel gave quick hand signals, and the guards moved ahead to secure the route. The corridor was quieter, but the air still felt heavy with tension. Leora kept close, not because she wanted to, but because she could sense danger nearby. Her empathic sense pulsed like a warning beacon. Panic, anger, fear, all swirling in the air like a storm. Daniel glanced at her. "You're not panicking," he noted. I've lived with fear around me for years," she said quietly. "It's almost normal now." Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even respect. But he didn't press. They reached an emergency exit leading into a narrow alley between two council towers. The sounds of shouting and sirens came from the main plaza beyond. Daniel paused, checking the corner before stepping out. The plaza was chaos. Smoke billowed from a market stall that had been ripped apart. Fragments of metal littered the ground, and a damaged hover cart lay on its side. Council guards shouted orders while medics tried to help the injured. "This way," Daniel said, guiding her along the outer edge of the square. "We need to get you somewhere safe." "I'm not," Leora began, but stopped. What would be the point of arguing? She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't trained for moments like this. Still, she couldn't ignore the feeling in her mind, a sharp, focused intent hiding in the noise of fear. Someone nearby wasn't panicking. Someone was hunting. She stopped suddenly. "Wait," Daniel turned, alert. "What is it?" "There." She pointed toward a cluster of panicked civilians, near a fountain. Among them, a tall figure in a dark cloak moved steadily, unaffected by the chaos. The figure's emotions were wrong, cold, determined. Daniel followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing. "Stay here." He moved toward the crowd, blending in with surprising ease despite his armor. Leora watched as he got close to the cloaked figure, and then, in one swift motion, grabbed the person's arm and twisted it behind their back. A weapon clattered to the ground, a compact pulse blaster. The crowd gasped and moved back. Two human guards appeared instantly to help restrain the suspect. Daniel said something into his wrist comm, then returned to Leora. "That one was about to start shooting," he said matter-of-factly. "Good catch." Leora blinked. "I just felt it." He studied her for a moment. "That's twice now you've kept me alive in less than a day." "I didn't." She stopped, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, as if she were an asset, not a burden. They moved to a temporary security post set up at the edge of the plaza. From here, Daniel could coordinate with his team, and Leora could watch the unfolding scene without being in direct danger. "Is this how humans always work?" she asked after a moment, watching him give orders through his comm. Risking your lives for someone you just met? Daniel smirked faintly. Pretty much. We've got a saying. You don't leave your friends behind. I'm not your friend, she said quietly. Not yet, he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She didn't know what to say to that. Later that evening, the summit hall was closed for investigation, but the delegates were moved to smaller meeting rooms to continue talks. Daniel, now free from immediate duty, found Leora sitting near a balcony overlooking the city. You could have gone home hours ago, he said. I was told to wait for my aunt, Leora replied. She's still in a council meeting. Daniel leaned against the railing, looking out over the city lights. So, you're Irene. Anything I should know about your people before I embarrass myself in front of your leaders? Leora gave a faint smile. We value perfection, physical, mental, emotional. We don't adapt well to difference. Sounds exhausting, Daniel said. It is, she admitted. He glanced at her. And your gift? The thing that lets you sense people like that gunman? Her smile faded. It's not a gift. It's a flaw. My aura makes most Irene males feel uneasy, sometimes worse. No one can stand to be near me for long. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I've been near you all day. Yes. And that's strange, she said softly. You don't seem affected. Maybe humans are built different, he said with a small shrug. Or maybe I just like your company. Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to such direct words. Among Irene, conversations like this simply didn't happen. As night deepened, the sounds of the city quieted. Leora's aunt finally arrived to escort her home, but before she left, Daniel spoke again. Tomorrow I'm back on Plaza Security. If you're at the summit again, stop by. We could use your help spotting trouble. I'm not a soldier, she reminded him. No, he said, but you've already saved lives. That counts for something. For a long moment she looked at him, at the human who could stand next to her without flinching, who treated her like she mattered. Then she nodded. I'll think about it. The next day, trouble came faster than either of them expected. Leora had barely arrived at the summit hall when a wave of sharp, alien anger hit her senses. It was coming from the western gate, the entry point for the Vicari delegation. She pushed through the crowd, searching for Daniel. He spotted her first. Something's wrong? They're here, she said. The ones who want war. And sure enough, as the Vicari entered, an argument erupted with the Irene guards. Voices rose, weapons were drawn, and the tension spread like wildfire. Daniel stepped forward, putting himself between the two groups, his voice firm but steady. Back it down. Everyone, he shouted. But in the swirling emotions, Leora could feel it. Someone was deliberately fueling the anger, pushing it higher. Her eyes scanned the crowd until she found the source. Another cloaked figure standing near the edge, whispering into a comm. Daniel! She called, pointing. He moved instantly, weaving through the crowd and tackling the saboteur before the man could vanish. The comm device fell to the ground, still transmitting. Daniel picked it up and listened, and what he heard made his jaw tighten. Multiple teams, targets confirmed, begin operation. He looked at Leora. This isn't just sabotage, it's a coordinated strike. For the rest of the day, they worked together, Daniel's tactical skills and Leora's empathic senses creating an unlikely but effective team. They intercepted 2 more infiltrators, both carrying hidden explosives. Each time, Daniel stayed close, never showing the discomfort she expected. By the time the sun set, a fragile peace still held in the summit hall. But Leora knew it wouldn't last. The emotions in the air were too sharp, too dangerous. Someone wanted war badly, and they were willing to tear the city apart to get it. That night, as she stood on her balcony again, she thought about Daniel's words. You don't leave your friends behind. The first sign came at dawn. Leora woke to the distant sound of alarms, low, pulsing tones that echoed across Zerath Prime. She stepped onto her balcony and saw smoke curling up from the western quarter of the city. Small flashes lit the horizon, like lightning trapped between the towers. Her door chime rang sharply. She opened it to find her aunt, pale and tense. "Stay inside," her aunt ordered. "The Vicari have attacked the defense perimeter. The council is calling it an unprovoked act of war." Leora's stomach tightened. "Daniel," her aunt's eyes narrowed. "The human commander? He will take care of himself. You should not be thinking about—" But Leora was already moving. She didn't want to hear the rest. She threw on her robe and left through the back stairwell, her heart pounding. The streets were different now. No music, no merchants calling out their goods. Instead, armed patrols moved quickly in groups. Civilians hurried toward shelters. The sound of distant gunfire snapped through the air like cracking glass. Leora felt waves of fear and anger coming from every direction. But under it all, there were sharp, focused points. Soldiers, determined and ready to fight. She followed those threads until she reached the central plaza. The grand fountain that once shimmered in the sun was now covered by a makeshift barricade. Behind it, human soldiers in dark armor crouched with their weapons ready. Daniel was there, shouting orders. His voice was steady despite the chaos. When he saw her, he froze for only a second before moving toward her. "Leora? What are you doing here? This is a combat zone." "I can help," she said quickly. "You need to know where the enemy is moving. I can feel them." Daniel studied her face. "You're serious?" "Yes," she said. "I'm not staying hidden while this city burns." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "All right, stay close, and don't argue when I tell you to move." The first real fight came minutes later. From behind the barricade, Leora felt it, a wave of cold determination creeping closer from the east side of the plaza. "They're coming from that street," she told Daniel, pointing. He gave quick signals to his team. Moments later, figures in dark Vicari armor appeared, moving low and fast. Energy bolts lit the air. The humans returned fire, their rifles, barking sharp bursts. Leora stayed low, her back pressed to the barricade, but she kept calling out where the enemy was moving. "Two more! Behind the cart!" Daniel's squad adjusted instantly, forcing the attackers to retreat. When it was over, Daniel crouched beside her. "You just saved us a lot of trouble." Her hands were shaking. "I've never been in a fight before." He gave her shoulder a quick squeeze. "You handled it better than most." The fighting spread through the streets. Daniel led his squad toward the western quarter, where smoke poured from burning buildings. Leora followed, staying behind cover when the shooting started, but always scanning the emotional currents around them. She could feel when danger was close, when the enemy was regrouping, when civilians were hiding nearby. At one point, they found a collapsed market stall blocking a narrow street. Beneath the wreckage, Leora felt the sharp pulse of fear. "Someone's trapped," she said. Daniel and two soldiers worked quickly, lifting the heavy beams. A family of small reptilian traders scrambled out, coughing. The mother clutched her children and gave a shaky nod of thanks before fleeing toward safety. Leora couldn't help noticing how Daniel moved, always checking on his people, always putting himself in the risky spots first. She had never seen an Ireni male act like that. By midday, they reached the outer defense wall. The sky was choked with smoke, and the twin suns looked pale and sickly. The Vicari were pushing hard, trying to break through. Daniel's comm crackled with orders from his commander. "Hold your position. Reinforcements are 30 minutes out." 30 minutes felt like a lifetime in battle. Leora crouched beside him behind a broken section of wall. "They're coming again. From the left this time," Daniel nodded, relaying the warning. His soldiers shifted just in time to catch the attackers before they could flank the position. The air filled with the roar of weapons and the smell of scorched metal. One Vicari soldier broke through the line, charging toward Leora with a blade in hand. She froze, the wave of his rage slamming into her senses. Before she could move, Daniel was there, tackling the attacker to the ground, disarming him with a swift strike. He didn't even look back as he rejoined the fight. Leora's chest felt tight, not just from fear, from something deeper. When the reinforcements finally arrived, the Vicari line broke. The humans and Irene soldiers pushed them back toward the western quarter. Daniel's squad was ordered to escort civilians from the danger zone. Leora stayed with them, guiding the group through the smoke-filled streets. Her empathic sense allowed her to avoid enemy patrols, leading them through narrow alleys and hidden courtyards. At one point, a young Irene boy stumbled, too tired to keep up. Leora lifted him into her arms without thinking. His small hands clung to her robe, and for once, she didn't feel the usual rejection. He was too frightened to notice her aura, or maybe, like Daniel, he simply didn't care. When they reached the safe zone, the boy's mother thanked her over and over. Leora only nodded, her eyes drifting to Daniel. He was watching her with that same curious expression she had seen the first day they met. By nightfall, the city was quieter, but everyone knew it was only a pause. Fires still burned in the distance, and the council declared a full state of emergency. Daniel found Leora sitting on a low wall near the refugee center. She looked exhausted, her robe stained with dust and smoke. "You did good today," he said. She gave a tired smile. "I only told you where they were." "That's more than half the battle," he replied. "You've got something special, Leora. Don't let anyone tell you it's a flaw." Her heart skipped at the words. Why do you stay near me?" she asked quietly. "Every other male pulls away." He shrugged. "Maybe humans are immune to whatever it is, or maybe I just know a good person when I see one." She looked away, afraid he'd see the warmth in her eyes. That night, as she lay on a cot in the refugee center, Leora thought about the day. She had walked through fire and fear, and she had not been alone. Daniel had been there every step, never flinching, never turning away. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but she knew one thing: she would not run from it. Not while Daniel was still out there, fighting for this city. The next day began with a sky full of warships. From the balcony of the refugee center, Leora saw them, massive Vicari cruisers drifting above the city like dark predators. The sunlight reflected off their jagged hulls, making them look like blades in the sky. The Irene defense fleet hovered in a tight formation, ready to protect Zayrath Prime. The air itself seemed heavy, as if the whole city was holding its breath. Inside, Daniel was already gearing up. His dark armor was scratched from the last day's fighting, but he moved with the same steady focus. "What's happening?" Leora asked. He tightened the strap on his rifle. "Scouts say one of those ships, the flagship, is carrying the noble who started this war. If we can disable it, the rest of the fleet might stand down." Leora felt a cold ripple through her. "You're going up there?" "Yeah," Daniel said simply. "My squad's been chosen for the infiltration. Small team, fast strike," she swallowed. "That's suicide." He gave her a faint grin. "Only if we fail." Minutes later, the council broadcast an evacuation order for certain districts. The city's airships began ferrying civilians out. But Leora barely noticed. Her focus was on Daniel. When his squad gathered in the briefing room, she lingered near the door, listening. The plan was simple but dangerous. Slip past the enemy's outer defenses in a stealth shuttle, board the flagship, plant an EMP charge in the engine core, and escape before the detonation. The EMP wouldn't destroy the ship, but it would leave it powerless, unable to fire or flee. There was one problem. The flagship was heavily crewed, and its security systems were advanced. Getting to the engine core without being caught would be almost impossible. That's when Daniel glanced at her. "Unless," he said slowly, "we use her." The other soldiers turned. Leora stiffened. "Me? You can push emotions," Daniel explained. "Confuse them. Make them feel things they don't expect in the middle of a fight." She hesitated. "I can't control it perfectly." "You don't have to," he said. "Just be yourself. Let your aura do the work." Her instinct was to refuse. The Ireni had always told her to hide her ability, not use it. But then she looked at Daniel, at the quiet certainty in his eyes, and something inside her shifted. "I'll do it," she said. The shuttle ride was tense and silent. Through the small viewport, Leora saw the enemy ships growing larger, their hulls covered in sharp ridges and glowing red vents. Daniel sat beside her, checking his gear one last time. "You'll stay with me the whole way," he said. "We move together no matter what." She nodded, clutching the small communicator clipped to her robe. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. The shuttle jolted as it slipped into the flagship's hangar bay. The team moved fast, dropping to the deck and fanning out. Leora followed close behind Daniel, her senses reaching out. Almost immediately she felt them. Dozens of Vakari crew members nearby. Their emotions were sharp and controlled, trained for combat. But as she walked past, she let her aura expand, brushing against their minds. Confusion rippled through them. A few hesitated mid-step, their focus breaking. One guard stopped entirely, staring as if he'd forgotten what he was supposed to be doing. Daniel took the chance to slip past unnoticed. The deeper they went, the stronger the tension became. The corridors were lit with a harsh red glow, and the constant hum of the engines vibrated through the floor. At one intersection, they ran into a patrol. Weapons came up instantly. Leora felt their aggression like a blade. She pushed back with everything. She had, not with her hands but with her mind. The guards faltered, their anger melting into sudden uncertainty. One even lowered his weapon slightly, looking at his comrade in confusion. That was all Daniel's squad needed. In seconds, the Vakari were disarmed and tied, left in the shadows. "You're doing great," Daniel murmured as they moved on. Finally, they reached the engine core, a massive cylindrical chamber filled with glowing machinery. The air was hot and metallic. Daniel set the EMP charge on the main conduit. 2 minutes to detonation," he said. But before they could leave, an alarm blared. Steel doors slammed shut, sealing the exits. From the far end of the chamber, a tall figure emerged, clad in ornate armor with a crimson crest. Leora felt his emotions before she even saw his face. Cold pride, contempt, and a deep hatred for anyone who stood in his way. The Ireni noble who had started the war. "You," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The cursed one." His gaze shifted to Daniel, and the human she hides behind. Daniel stepped forward, rifle ready. "You're done here. Call off your fleet." The noble laughed. "Do you think crippling my ship will stop this? The war has already begun." The noble's guards poured into the chamber. Daniel's squad formed a tight circle, firing to keep them back. Leora stayed in the center, fear pounding in her chest. She could feel the determination of the enemy, the way they fed off their leader's confidence. She had only seconds to make a choice: hide behind Daniel, or fight in the only way she could. Leora closed her eyes and let her aura surge outward, stronger than ever before. She pushed waves of doubt, hesitation, even shame into the minds around her. The nearest guards faltered, lowering their weapons. Others stepped back, confusion clouding their faces. Daniel seized the moment, firing in controlled bursts and driving the rest away from the exits. The noble snarled. "Pathetic tricks!" But Leora stepped toward him. "You built your power on fear. I can take that away." For a moment, his emotions flickered, a ripple of uncertainty breaking through his arrogance. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Daniel lunged, knocking the noble's weapon away and slamming him to the deck. The EMP charge detonated with a deep, bone-shaking thud. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engines died. The entire ship shuddered to a stop. "Move!" Daniel shouted. They fought their way back to the hangar, Leora still pushing her aura in every direction to slow pursuit. By the time they reached the shuttle, the flagship was drifting powerless in space. As the shuttle pulled away, Leora looked back through the viewport. The once imposing ship now hung still among the stars, its escorts already breaking formation. "You did it," Daniel said, sitting beside her. "We did it," she corrected softly. Back on Zerath Prime, the news spread quickly. With the flagship disabled and its leader captured, the Vakari fleet began negotiating a ceasefire. The council declared the city safe for now, but all Leora could think about was the moment she had stepped forward, choosing to use the ability. She had hated all her life. For the first time, she didn't see it as a curse. That night, Daniel found her on the balcony again, looking at the stars. "You were incredible up there," he said. She shook her head. "I was terrified." "So, was I," he said with a small smile. "That's how you know it matters." The medical bay of Zerath Prime's central hospital smelled faintly of clean air and antiseptic. White light poured down from the high ceilings, making every corner bright and sharp. Leora sat beside a bed, her pale fingers curled gently around. Daniel's face was pale, but his breathing was steady. The medic said he would live. His side was wrapped in healing gel and protective cloth after the wound he had taken aboard the enemy flagship. He had almost died to save her people. Leora couldn't stop replaying the moment in her mind, the way he had stumbled after planting, the explosives, the blood staining his armor, the stubborn determination in his eyes when he told her to go without him. She had refused. She was still refusing. She would not leave. A faint groan broke her thoughts. Daniel's eyes opened slowly, focusing on the ceiling before shifting toward her. "You stayed?" he murmured, voice rough. "Of course," Leora said, her tone firm but soft. "Where else would I be?" He smiled weakly. "Most people would have run when things got dangerous." "I'm not most people," she replied, squeezing his hand. "And you are not someone I leave behind." Recognition and change, 2 days. Later, the Ireni Council called for a public meeting in the Grand Plaza. News of the sabotage, the near destruction of the city, and the prevention of war had spread across the system. Leora and Daniel were summoned as honored guests. The plaza was filled with people from dozens of alien races. The towering crystalline spire of the council building rose in the background, its surface reflecting the afternoon light. The head counselor, an older Ireni male with silver markings, stepped forward. His voice carried through the amplifiers. "Citizens of Zerath Prime," he began. "Today we honor 2 individuals who showed courage when others faltered. One is not of our world, the other is one of us. Yet long treated as an outcast," a murmur rippled through the crowd. Leora held her head high, though she felt the weight of thousands of eyes on her. "Leora of House Envar," the counselor continued, "you have used the gift you once feared to protect this city and prevent the slaughter of thousands. You showed that what we call imperfection may be our greatest strength." Then he turned to Daniel. "Commander Daniel Reyes of Earth, you risked your life for someone our people shunned. You stood by her when we would not. Your actions have opened the way for new relations between Ireni and humans." The crowd erupted in applause, some polite, some genuinely enthusiastic. Leora glanced at Daniel, who looked slightly uncomfortable in the spotlight. but smiled at her with quiet pride. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to hide. A conversation under the moons. That evening, after the ceremony, Leora and Daniel walked along the high balcony of the council building. The air was cool, and the twin moons hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the city. Below them, the streets were alive with celebration. Music drifted upward, and lights glimmered, like tiny stars. "You know," Daniel said, leaning against the railing, "I didn't really plan to become a hero. I just couldn't stand the idea of you facing all of this alone." Leora turned to face him. "You didn't have to. You could have walked away like everyone else." "Yeah, but humans don't really do that," he said with a half smile. "At least not the good ones." She studied him in the moonlight. "You are different." "You don't see me as dangerous or broken." "That's because you're not," he replied simply. "You've been told that so many times you started believing it. But I see the real you, strong, smart, stubborn as hell. That's the Leora." "I know." Something warm spread through her chest. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his. "And you stayed. I'll always stay," he said. The bond that changed worlds. Over the following weeks, Daniel's recovery was steady. He spent time learning more about Ireni culture, while Leora accompanied him on tours of the human embassy's facilities. The two worlds began exchanging envoys, scientists, and traders. Whispers followed them wherever they went. The outcast Ireni and the human soldier, it was a story people couldn't stop talking about. Some spoke of it as a scandal, others as a symbol of hope. One afternoon, Leora was approached by a group of younger Ireni females. In the past, such encounters had ended in awkward silences or polite avoidance, but this time, their expressions were curious, even respectful. "Is it true?" one of them asked. "That you stood on the enemy flagship and turned their crew against them?" Leora smiled slightly. "It's true. But I didn't do it alone." The others glanced at Daniel, who was leaning against a wall nearby, watching with mild amusement. "Humans are strange," another girl whispered, "but maybe not in a bad way." For Leora, it was a small but powerful shift. The final test piece between the Ireni and Vakari was still fragile. Rumors of remaining warlords surfaced. One such group threatened to attack the trade routes, and Daniel was called to assist a joint Ireni-human task force. Before he left, Leora found him in the docking bay. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, her voice steady but her hands tight at her sides. He touched her shoulder gently. "I promise. But I need you here, Leora. You've become a bridge between our people. That's not something I can do alone." She understood then. Their bond wasn't just personal. It had changed the way two civilizations saw each other. When he left aboard the sleek human corvette, she watched until the ship was only a faint light among the stars. Homecoming weeks later, Daniel returned. The mission had been dangerous, but successful. As he stepped down the ramp, Leora didn't hesitate. She crossed the bay and wrapped her arms around him. "You kept your promise," she said. "Told you I would," he replied with a grin. Epilogue. The human who stood by her months passed, and the galaxy slowly adjusted to the new Ireni-human alliance. Trade increased. Cultural exchange flourished, and in every story told of how peace had been saved, two names were always spoken together. One evening, on the same balcony where they had once talked under the moons, Daniel and Leora stood side by side, watching the city lights. "Do you ever think about how this all started?" Daniel asked. "Just a random meeting in a crowded hall." "It wasn't random," Leora said softly. "It was the moment my life began to change." He glanced at her, curious. "How so?" "Because no Ireni male had ever stood by me," she said, turning to meet his eyes. until a human did, and he never left.